With me on the program now to discuss these issues, among several others, we've got the Parliamentary Secretary to the Treasurer, Ed Husic, and the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, Josh Frydenberg. Good morning, gentlemen. Josh, should the Prime Minister, first of all, attend that summit to be convened by the UN Secretary-General in September? You can hear the very different message from that spokesman at the UN to what the Prime Minister had to say on the importance of climate change as well.
Well, first things first, we will be represented at a senior level at that conference. So Australia will have a voice at this UN-led conference on climate change.
Who will that be?
Well, that will be determined in due course, and I'm sure Greg Hunt, as the responsible minister, will have more to say about that. But the point is the Prime Minister will have a very busy second half of the year in terms of travel commitments with the East Asia Summit, the APEC, and of course in November hosting the G20 in Brisbane, which will be the biggest meeting that Australia has ever held. So I think he's got a very busy international travel schedule together with his busy domestic commitments, and I'm sure he will ensure that Australia is well represented.
What about the different messages that we heard there from the Prime Minister on the floor of the Stock Exchange and that of Dan Thomas, the climate spokesman for the Secretary-General, when he spoke to David Spears?
Well, the Prime Minister has said on this trip that climate change is a significant problem and Australia is committed to doing its part, and the Emissions Reduction Fund, in which we contributed through this budget of more than $2.5 billion, is the centrepiece of our direct action policy. Look, there are different ways to go about, tackling and reducing carbon emissions. We believe in an incentive-based scheme, and that's direct action. Labor believes in a carbon tax. Even the Americans don't believe in a carbon tax, and that is what was clear from Barack Obama's statement just the other day. So we believe we've got the measures right. We're investing a significant amount of taxpayers' dollars in reducing emissions, and we look forward to participating in international groupings and meetings to try to move this issue forward.
Ed Husic, the Prime Minister, has received an endorsement from none other than Kim Beazley, the Australian ambassador to the United States, former Labor leader, for the coalition's approach, that is, to dealing with climate change. He's quoted in today's Daily Telegraph pretty much saying that they've got things right in terms of the targets and so on. That is, as I say, an endorsement from your former federal leader.
Kim is being utterly professional as a representative of the nation and of the government in putting forward his views. He's entitled to those views, but I think what is clear is the government, when you look across the world, is out of step with what people are saying needs to be done to address climate change and to address global warming. And what we have is a situation where in the US they're putting a fairly serious effort into changing the way that they use energy, and you saw some of the emission target reductions that were being put forward last week. You can see in China, where pollution's a massive issue, a massive political issue for them in big cities like Beijing, where they recognise that they've got to change the way that they work and operate to ensure the continued health and also prosperity of their own country. And what we have here is a government that's just dragging its feet while the rest of the world's moving. Now, if I can pick up on some of the points Josh said, we wanted to see an emissions trading scheme in place, which is what the other big partners of ours, like for example China, are looking at as well, and we wanted to move to that. What we've got now is a government, in the Abbott government, moving from a system where we made polluters pay to them now paying polluters. They're using billions of taxpayer funds to basically pay polluters in a fingers-crossed effort to see if they'll reduce emissions, which other studies have shown those grant-based systems just don't work, and we're going to be the worst for it. They've got to get on with the job of reducing emissions instead of playing around with the future of future generations.
Ed Husic, while we talk about some comments this morning from the United Nations, there was a very public endorsement of the Prime Minister's position yesterday from the Canadian Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, a very public and strong endorsement of the scrapping of the carbon tax. So he's not alone. You say he's isolated, but he's not alone, is he, on the world stage? There are certainly others with a similar worldview, aren't there?
People like, you look at countries like China and the US that are moving on this, Europe that's already moving ahead solidly and changing the way that they use energy, because it's not just an environmental issue, it's an economic one, using resources smarter. And just because he's got one ideological soulmate in Canada that's endorsing his view when the rest of the world's moving doesn't make it a big endorsement at all, frankly. And I as I've said previously, Kieran, I just couldn't look future generations in the eye and say that when we had a chance to have meaningful reform in this area, to make a big cut in emissions by changing the way we work, we didn't take it and we just shoved it off to future generations to do that heavy lifting. I just think it's reprehensible.
Josh Frydenberg, apparently President Obama is going to be making a television appearance tonight, making his case on climate change. Last week there was the commitment, that significant commitment to reduce emissions of power plants through the Environmental Protection Agency. He's really stepping this up as a second-term legacy of his, isn't he? And the timing of it, ahead of the PM's visit to the White House, could be awkward.
Look, Kieran, we strongly and warmly welcome President Obama's initiative, and we too have put in place a number of measures to try to clean up power stations, whether it's in the transmission of energy, whether it's in the storage, or whether it's in the overall general efficiency of these plants. And when Ed talks about us as the coalition wanting to give money to dirty polluters, in fact it was Labor that was giving $5 billion to the coal-fired power stations. So I don't know what he's talking about there. In terms of the carbon tax, it's about to go up again on July 1. We need to pass the legislation to repeal the carbon tax through the Senate, because every year it's a $550 hit to Australian families. No other country in the world has an economy-wide carbon tax. That's what Labor's legacy is. We're determined to try to create more jobs in Australia, not destroy jobs.
Well,
and we believe the carbon tax does that.
But as you know, President Obama's strong regulations are designed to encourage market mechanisms at the state level. That's the whole purpose of it, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So he actually he believes in the approach of a market and a price.
Yeah, and we believe in a market too. That's why we're looking for the lowest cost of abatement through our emissions reductions fund. But, you know, both Barack Obama and Tony Abbott and Stephen Harper and a number of other leaders are not going down the path of a carbon tax. That's very clear. We're trying to create incentives, and that's the best model for us.
That's just.
All right,
can
let's
I just
take
say?
a break. Yeah, sure, Ed, just quickly. Ed, yep.
Or to polluters. They'll hand over subsidies to polluters, and it's ridiculous to say that they support market-based mechanisms when they don't support an ETS.
Ed Husic, Josh Frydenberg, a quick break, back in just a moment. Thank you, Laura. We'll chat to you soon. Josh Frydenberg, to you first. We've got Ed Husic and Josh Frydenberg with us. Josh, what are the political implications? What political implications do you see in a contemporary sense from these events, alleged events of the mid-90s?
Oh, look, these are obviously serious allegations, and you know everyone will get their day in court to put their case. But what we're on about is having a system where there is a proper governance of the unions after what we saw with the Health Services Union. This is the hard-working members of the union's own money. We don't want to see it abused, and there was obviously sufficient numbers of allegations and evidence for a Royal Commission. Let's just see how it plays out, but quite clearly there are serious allegations that have been made.
Yeah, quickly, Ed, your thoughts on the developments and the allegations, very public hearing of these things that have been around for decades now?
Well, I don't think it's right to provide a running commentary on these things because, you know, at the end of the day, this government set this process up as a witch hunt. You know, they say we're open for business and now they're importing North Korean show trials here to Australia. I'm waiting for Dennis Rodman to be counsel assisting soon. But, you know, if they're serious about making sure that governance and propriety occurs, let's see the Royal Commission into Liberal Party fundraising and slush funds. Then we'll be able to judge whether or not this is a fair income government.
We've achieved a first, at least this morning. Dennis Rodman getting a mention. I never thought that would happen, but well done, Ed Husic, to you on that. I want to ask you about the cuts at the Australia Post this morning. The Australia Post chief Ahmed Fahar has defended his $4.7 million a year's salary. With 900 jobs to go, Ed Husick, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you could halve Ahmed's salary and you'd still have an issue. The issue is the number of residences in this country continues to grow. Mail volumes to those residents drops, and every working day there's an expectation that, you know, your postie will come past and deliver your mail. And I think, you know, frankly, something's going to have to give in due course. The internet's been hugely disruptive, and I remember from my time representing postal workers seeing mail volumes start to contract fairly viciously from 2008 before the GFC. So there is a need for change. But in saying that, there's also a challenge as well, because you've got a number of posties, thousands of posties out there that work 5 days a week, and you're proposing to potentially, if you change the community service obligations and the way in which we deliver mail, you've got to change, you know, the days in which they're working. So it's a big issue. But, you know, Ahmed Fahour isn't a bloke that's going to sit there and avoid hard decisions. He'll try to make those decisions, and having dealt with the bloke, I know he'll try and do it in a way that balances the needs of the business with the needs of employees. But it's very difficult.
The point, Josh Frydenberg, that the Chief Executive has made this morning is that remuneration is something, a matter for the board and their decision, but again, that sort of high figure when 900 jobs are going to be lost in your city of Melbourne, it probably won't go down too well with many of those employees at Australia Post.
Oh, look, it's a tragedy. Every day somebody does lose their job, but you know, I'm actually at one here with what Ed has just said. There is an enormous amount of disruptive technology, and this is going to change the business model for Australia Post, and Ahmed Fahour doesn't have an enviable job in trying to restructure a business which is an Australian icon, and we all want to see Australia Post not only survive but to be strengthened, and looking at new ways it can make revenue in this new environment I think will be extremely important. But the point I would like to reinforce, Kieran, is that more than 100,000 new jobs have been created since the Abbott government came into office. So across the economy, yes, we have seen some job losses, no doubt, in some of the industries, particularly around manufacturing and businesses like Australia Post, where the business model is changing. But we've also seen the creation of tens of thousands, over 100,000 new jobs in just the last 9 or so months. So that's a positive
well, what about,
message.
Just quickly, your thoughts on the privatisation or you know, that sort of prospect? Would that have any impact? Quickly, Josh and Ed. Josh, first you.
Well, we're not moving to privatise Australia Post. What we're looking to do is to try to help it adjust to the new business environment, and that might be able to give it new forms of new sources of revenue. But we do have a broader privatisation agenda, and obviously it starts with Medibank Private, and we've announced scoping studies into ASIC's registry function, into the defence housing and the like, because we believe in some cases the private sector can do the job better than the government can.
Quickly, Ed, to wrap up.
Well, if Australia Post has, you know, challenges to its operations, the answer isn't privatising it. It's looking at what you can, looking at its strengths and seeing how it can evolve. Its strengths are its brand, its reputation, but it also has, you know, over 4,000 outlets across the country, and Post has already started looking at using those outlets for service delivery of government services, and you know, there's scope for them to do more into the future and to change the way they work, to move more into parcels in the face of some pretty tough competition. I think they've got a bright future if they make the changes that are necessary today, but it's going to involve some tough decisions in the short term.
Gentlemen, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kieran. Thanks, Ed.
A quick break on AIM Agenda, back in just a moment with more from New York and David Spears.